So thank you everyone for joining us today for this Zoom meeting. So this isn't a webinar, this is a Zoom meeting. This is a community of practice call to really provide an opportunity for dialogue and networking amongst people across Canada who are charged in their community with locating and securing housing units and building relationship with landlords. Like, super excited about this. We really made this the theme of our webinars and community of practice calls this month because we had so many folks asking for sample job descriptions, kind of starting new roles in their community, and I think just asking lots of questions about this area and thinking it would be fantastic if we could help develop a bit more of connection and networking happening across the country in terms of these roles. So that is what we are doing today. And I want to start by just acknowledging that I am within Kitchener, Ontario. I'm occupying land that is within the territory and traditional lands of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. I acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. So just giving you a moment to also acknowledge the land you reside on and occupy. My name is Morrison. I'm a director with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness with Built for Zero Canada. And with us today, we have Iain Jong, who is our facilitator of the conversation, a facilitator extraordinaire. So, I mean, certainly tons of expertise in this area in that he had done the webinar on the topic earlier this month, but also very excited. I know he has some key questions for you and some things to get the dialogue going amongst the group here today. So I did mention that there was a previous webinar on this topic. It was on May 4th, and it was sort of best practices, tips and tricks that Iain walked us through. And so everyone after this will be getting the presentation. So if you're not grabbing it off the website, you can grab it from the presentation in terms of the recording and the PowerPoint for more information on this topic. This webinar is being brought to you today from the Canadian Alliance, which leads a national movement of individuals, organizations, and communities working together to end homelessness in Canada and includes the 5 key initiatives you see there on the slide. This by name list and coordinated access related webinar is a support being provided to communities funded in part by the Government of Canada through the CCI funding stream of Reaching Home. And this webinar is part of a monthly series. So we do a monthly webinar and a community of practice call. You can find all of the upcoming and archived webinars on the TTA website, the Training and Technical Assistance website that you see there. And just in terms of housekeeping, so we are recording today's call and it will go out to everyone who registered and then it will be available on the website. This is a Zoom meeting, as I mentioned, rather than a webinar so that you can more easily unmute yourselves and we can join in a dialogue. Everyone is muted to start. You can put your hand up in the Zoom, function at the bottom there if you're interested in speaking, or you can just unmute yourself. We'll see how it goes. How many folks do we have on right now? Iain, I'm not seeing the number. Where is that number?
40. We have 40 people.
We have 40. So, some more might join on, but that's actually not a bad number for a dialogue. We had 120 people register, so I didn't know how many people we'd have on the call, but I'm hoping we can engage in a good conversation. But again, you can also use the chat to share your ideas and questions and that sort of thing as well. Before we jump in, I did want to make sure you're aware of some resources that are available on our website related to this topic. So under program areas on the Built for Zero website, there's a page dedicated to housing help and landlords. And so wanted you to be aware of that. And then on that page, what you will find is a number of drop downs, including a previous webinar on this topic, resources to support renters, including renters toolkits and self-advocacy resources, information about the Rent Smart certificate program, as well as information on home takeovers and flexible funding. There's also resources to recruit and retain landlords, including toolkits and a whole bunch of ideas. There's also resources specifically that communities have created speaking to landlords. So wanted you to know that was there. Also, just to highlight, this is often a resource that people mention they find very helpful. So it's a whole guide. It is on the website as well, but I just wanted to mention that that was there. I also wanted to ask something of you. Again, we get so many requests for job descriptions for this role that if you're able to flip into the chat a link to your job description, or able to send it to me afterwards at that email. We would love to, be able to collect those. And if you're okay with it, share examples of them on our website for others. So with all that being said, with no further ado, I am going to stop sharing the screen here, and I'm going to turn it over to Iain.
Thanks, Marie, and welcome everybody. So glad to be with you again today and to play the role of facilitator as opposed to the role of the person who's talking all the time. I have some questions to guide our conversation today, but the responses that you give may lead to follow-up questions, and we may go on a completely different tangent. I'm going to start with one of my favorite questions when I've done these kind of national calls in different environments, and that is a little thing called the magnificent moment. The magnificent moment is your opportunity to share something that you're doing that you think is working remarkably well in the recruitment or retainment of landlords. So recruitment or retainment, magnificent moment. Now there's a couple of caveats for the magnificent moment. One is it can't just be a one-off. It can't just be, well, there was this one landlord and she was amazing and we were able to do all these good things if it's not replicable. Those magnificent moments are things where you've had a breakthrough in your thinking or practice that would be replicable, not just in your community, but in a number of other communities. Also, don't overlook the obvious. Something that you figured out that's like, well, it wasn't that magnificent, could be the most obvious thing that was right in front of all of our noses that we've missed all the way along. And we're going to do this regionally. I'm going to start by asking for representatives from different provinces, just one rep from each province. And no, you're not going to plan it in advance. Whoever speaks first is the spokesperson to get us started. And I'm going to start with Alberta and British Columbia. Are there any magnificent moments in landlord recruitment or retention from Alberta or British Columbia that anybody would like to kick us off with sharing? Well, that's uncomfortable. Let's try the other coast. They've been awake longer. Atlantic Canada, do you have any magnificent moments?
Hi, Iain. It's Dawn. I'll share.
Hi. Thank you.
I'm going to keep my video off because I'm literally haggard. I had one of those days, and so I'm definitely not video worthy. So I'm just gonna get to hear my voice and,
all right,
feel my vibes. So here in Moncton, I'm in Moncton, New Brunswick, everybody. We are in the process, right? We currently don't have a landlord engagement strategy. We don't even have a landlord engagement person. So we're really starting from the ground up. And where we are right now is really even just trying to sell the necessity of this particular role to community and get funding for this position and so forth and so on. So right now what we're doing to make things work in Moncton for landlord engagement is our coordinated access. So all of our agencies in our community are really kind of doing parts of it. One thing that I did, that we did do in Moncton that I thought was really helpful, we were given supplements by our province to use to go find landlords, to recruit landlords, to take these supplements to house folks on our by names list. And it turned out to be like a really daunting kind of task because our province requires the unit, once we find one, to be inspected and pass inspection. So there were a lot of barriers, like kind of systematic barriers that came up. So one thing that we did was we secured funding to be able to pay a landlord the rent for the first month upon introduction. So when we contact a landlord and kind of chat about who we are, what our clientele looks like, and what we're asking for, we can also follow it up with, if you're interested, we can pay the rent for this month while we work out the details. And at the end of those details, if it doesn't make sense to move forward, we can all walk away, shake hands, and hope maybe do business in the future. That really took the load off, and it really helped us to secure some landlords. The unfortunate part is the funding was like it was limited. So it's not funding that we have going forward, but because we now have the data and the results to bring to community, it just kind of further highlights the need for landlord engagement, but it also provides our province, our city, with an opportunity to seek funding for those kinds of initiatives.
So the magnificent moment is this pool of money, albeit limited, that you could use in the initial landlord engagement to say, we're going to pay you the first month's rent right now, or the equivalent thereof, while we sort out all these details with the unit inspection with the province. Did I get that right, Don?
That is correct. And so then, so instead, you know, when it also gives us kind of like something in our back pocket to when we start the conversation with landlords. So we've gone from, you know, no landlord engagement now to some good landlord engagement, and landlords that we now know, they know us by name, they know our coordinated access name, they know what coordinated access is. So it's just starting conversations in community that weren't really necessarily happening before. So I feel like it was just a great starting point.
Brilliant, Don, and thanks for getting us kick-started on magnificent moments. We're going to turn our attention now to the north, the territories. Is there anybody from any of the territories on the call that would like to share a magnificent moment? All right, territories just aren't feeling the vibe. How about Ontario? Anybody in Ontario that has a magnificent moment to share?
Hi, I guess I can start. I'm Caitlin. I work in Durham region, which is like Toronto area. I'm pretty new to this role. I've only worked at North House for 2 months, so I'm kind of thrown into it as a landlord engagement specialist, which I'm really excited about. So for us, we had a lot of roadblocks with communicating with landlords and finding out what they kind of needed in terms of engagement. So we actually started going towards the way of surveys. So we, myself and Ashley, who's also on this call, are from 2 different agencies. And we basically made this survey to try and capture exactly what landlords are looking for in terms of engagement with specialists in agencies. We had a really amazing turnout. We actually had it open from April 26th to May 10th. We had 10 questions that were both open-ended as well as just kind of check marks or yes or no type answers. We had 292 landlords across the region of Durham answer and provide their kind of feedback with that. We took the results and we actually ran with them and are trying to create a database. It's been done in the States called Padmission. So we are now trying to move into kind of an Ontario, specifically Durham region, which we're really excited about. And we're hoping that landlords are able to show off their properties as well as having this kind of tenant client base function for us to help with at agency wide. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
All right, let me get this straight. You and a person who works at a different organization work collaboratively?
Completely online.
and wait a second, aren't we supposed to be in competition with each other? Aren't you supposed to be fighting over landlords? Why did you decide to do this together? Did you two know each other and like each other already, or was this a convenience that brought you together? Tell me more.
I'll jump in. So actually, as a landlord engagement specialist in Durham, I'm serving all agencies in Durham and trying to help all agencies connect to landlords and serve their clients. So we're really hoping that creating this database allows agencies to come in and find those willing and able landlords and connect with them easier and quicker. So yeah, in terms of competition, we're trying to work together, and I know what that's like, and trying to hide landlords and keep them for yourselves, but we're taking a different approach for sure.
Wow.
Hi, sorry, my name is Jessica. I'm from an agency that works with Caitlin, North House. I just kind of want to add to that. So another reason we piloted this project was because while Durham region is one region, it's very much so separated between the north and south. So the south is very suburban and city based, whereas the north is very rural and remote. And so in an effort to make sure that both the north and south were getting the support and the engagement responses needed, that was a way for both of our agencies to come together to service that entire population.
Oh, this gives me hope. Hope that we can collaborate in this space. This is fantastic. All right, I might be coming back with some of those things, but I want to make sure we have magnificent moments of everybody. I'm going to turn to Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Is there anybody from Manitoba or Saskatchewan that wants to share their magnificent moment? All right, how about Quebec? Any magical moments from Quebec? All right. No more magnificent moments to share from different regions, but I'm going to allow for anybody who had other magnificent moments that they want to share from any province or territory to jump in now and tell us a bit about what's going on in your community. I saw one person put in the chat, I can speak, and I would like to say to Sherwin, you're up.
Hey, my name is Sherwin Flight, and I work with End Homelessness St. John's. Our agency is a little different from most in the community because we don't actually do any of the frontline work. So we coordinate programs between all of the different agencies in the community. We started what we're calling our Home Connect program back in 2018. So we're a little further along, I think, than some people may be. So what we did is, you know, from the ground up, we built the program to be what the agencies and what the landlords needed. So I went out back in 2018 and I spoke to people at all of the different agencies and sort of asked them, you know, what kind of roadblocks are you running into? What would be helpful? What do you think about these ideas? And then we went out to the landlords and did the same. So we did some surveys, like was already mentioned. I think that's most of our landlord feedback came from surveys online. I met with them in person, especially if they were larger corporate landlords that had a lot of units in the city. So from the ground up, we sort of built it to cater to the needs of the people that would be using it. So basically what we've done is created a like a Kijiji-like website that lists all of the available units that we have under the program. So they've already been inspected and, you know, they're sort of good to go, I guess. You know, so that's a good way to put it. So that's only accessible to the community agencies. So they can log in, sort of sort and filter and you know, look for the type of units they're looking for and then apply directly through our website. And that application would go to the landlord. So the landlord still would have the final say. One thing that we noticed early on before we even had the program up and running is something that I'm sure most people here, you know, are aware of, and that's that, you know, landlords are usually trying to make a dollar. Or at least break even, right? You know, a lot of times when you ask them about different things, they're like, well, who's going to pay for that? Or why should I pay for that? So we realized kind of early on that we were going to need a pot of money to be able to address some of those issues. So we created what we're calling the Landlord Protection Fund. So that covers mainly rental arrears and property damage once someone moves out of a unit so that the landlord's not left on the hook, you know, for those costs. That's been really attractive for most of the landlords that, you know, we've come across so far, because, you know, before you even get into your, you know, your sales pitch, I guess you'll call it, one of the first things that they're saying is, hold on a second, you know, I've done this before, this is my story, and I was left and had to pay, you know, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, or was out 3 months rent or whatever the case. So, you know, by having that money sort of there, you know, as a guarantee, you know, if something goes wrong, you know, you're not on your own anymore. You know, that has been a big help for us. It's helped us attract and retain a fair number of landlords, you know, considering the size of our city compared to some others. And then another thing that we sort of noticed, and it's been sort of a big help, we would go through the trouble of, you know, sort of onboarding the landlord, collecting all the information, listing their rental unit, having it inspected, and then, you know, a couple of days later, the landlord's, you know, telling you that they've rented it on Kijiji, so, you know, it's not available anymore. So we realized that that was going to be a challenge as well. We wanted to inspect units and, you know, make sure that they were suitable to live in, but at the same time, you know, we were wasting a lot of time inspecting units that we were losing, sort of trickling off to Kijiji and Facebook and those kinds of things. So we sort of took our landlord protection fund money that we had and sort of twisted it a little. And now we offer what we call holding fees as well. So for us, that's not done until we inspect the unit and it's suitable for our clients. And that's to sort of, I guess, literally buy us, you know, time to, you know, have an agency be able to look through the units and pick one. So I think, you know, from a landlord point of view, which is sort of my thing, landlord engagement lead for End Homelessness St. John's, you know, overlooking the financial aspect or the money aspect, or expecting them to sort of do some of this stuff or cover some of this stuff just out of the kindness of their heart, you know, wasn't a realistic expectation. And we realized that, you know, we needed to come to the table with money too. It's been going well so far.
All right, Sherman, I got a question for you.
Sure.
And it's going to be on this, the damage fund. I forgot what the exact phrase you used. So playing devil's advocate before, I've heard, there we go, that's a general term, I've heard it doesn't work. The landlords just want to loony and toony you to death for everything that is like normal wear and tear. Is that true?
We haven't had that experience so far. You know, we specifically say that we don't cover normal wear and tear, obviously, anyway, because that's, you know, part of being a landlord. But we haven't really had anyone try. I'll just sum it all up and call it funny business. You know, the claims that we've had sort of come through so far have been, you know, legitimate claims. You know, for significant things. You know, it hasn't been, you know, like a broken door for $70, you know, those kinds of things. So I think it kind of goes in line with one of the things that I've read when we were putting this back together, and that they found that, you know, landlords, I don't know where this came from. I think it was the state somewhere, you know, sort of realized that, you know, that money, that guarantee that was there, you know, if they chipped away at that little bit by little bit until it was, you know, there was nothing left. And when they have a significant claim, you know, there's not going to be anything there. So our experience has been kind of in line with that so far. We haven't really seen any sort of abuse of it. And I guess part of that would be our inspections too. You know, we would be in there immediately before someone moved in. So if a landlord, you know, has some problems and, you know, we go in and take a look, it's clear very quickly if, you know, that's, you know, an issue that happened, you know, since the tenant moved in, or if it's normal wear and tear or some sort of structural or you know, plumbing issue or that kind of thing. So far we haven't had that experience.
That's awesome. So your magnificent moment is a combination of a bunch of things. You got a Kijiji-like website, you got units inspected, you've got holding fees, and you've got the ability to pay for deposits, damages, those sorts of things. Did I summarize that right? Sort of.
You read my mind on one. We don't usually cover deposits, but actually this would be more of an aha moment, because some of the other ones sort of just came about as we put the program together. But we realized that one of the problems we were running into was waiting for income support, which is our social assistance program, to pay for the deposit. So by the time paperwork got to them, they processed it, they sent it out. They also only pay up to $372. So another one of our programs usually had to top that up anyway. And then that was put as sort of money owing on the person's account with social assistance, that they would slowly 5% each pay take that back. So it was, you know, it was delaying the process of getting people housed. It was, you know, accumulating bills for people that realistically a lot of them would never be able to pay. So we're just about to sort of pilot paying those deposits ourselves. So instead of going through social assistance and then having those deposits go back to the tenant after, we would pay those so that someone could move in, you know, as quickly as possible. And at the end of the tenancy, those would come back to us. So we would cut out that having to wait for that deposit from social assistance out of that move-in equation completely.
Rock and roll, that's awesome. All right, Grant, you're up. Grant Martin.
Hey.
Good things in Stratford.
So some of the things are kind of touched on, but I think as part of kind of our participation with the Built for Zero Canada campaign, one of the improvement projects that we did through consultation with folks in Ottawa was to do a bit of a landlord blitz. And I think part of that came because folks felt like as if the landlord recruitment was stagnating, especially in a small community where it's very few housing providers, where it was like, oh, we already know everybody that provides housing. We've kind of tapped everywhere that can be tapped. And so we said, there might be some unearthing of hidden gems related to housing that we might be able to find. And so we kind of did this landlord blitz that aligned with the holiday season, and our target was to secure 10 new units for 10 households for the new year with move-in that come up directly from our by name list. And it worked really well as far as just a communication strategy that was disseminated through our kind of local homeless coalition and service providers. And what happened was we didn't necessarily reach our target of achieving 10, but we did secure 7 new units and from 4 landlords who were all landlords who nobody knew before. They were 100% new relationships. They weren't pre-existing ones. And so while we didn't reach our target, those were 7 new units that we never before and 4 new relationships that we forged from that process. And so we think it's worth a round 2 when we go into our June learning session to think about what we learned from that experience, what kind of tweaking we want to do, make some improvements to increase our kind of impact. The others that I would just say, we've done a lot of work year to year around creating opportunities for business cases for adjusted AMRs to make that business case that some of the rates that are proposed for our community are not reflective of the actual rent rates. And so it's been able to create more generous rent supplements and housing allowances. We've created a damages and repairs fund where it's through basically like an interest-free loan for certain Housing First ICM program participants, where it becomes a revolving fund where they can pay it back to the program that goes into that pot that becomes a flexible discretionary fund that can support other households. And if they pay back 50% of the total loan or make consistent payments, then we'll relieve them of the remaining 50% of the total of the loan. Landlords like that because they get money right away. Participants have been really good about making consistent payments of what they can afford, and it's very, very flexible. And the repayment rate has been really, really good. And the last I'll say is we're in the process of finalizing a draft for a housing allowance agreement that's formalized with landlords. We found that we have those with rent sup programs, not so much with housing allowances. And so it's really about standardizing what landlords can expect when they're participating in a Housing First program where housing allowances are administered, especially like standardizing costs, that idea of we're not going to upgrade your units, but we'll return it to its original state. It's not about wear and tear, that kind of stuff. So we're really, really excited about that, just so that there is kind of something that we can reference back to landlords and really create that checks and balances and mutual accountability around deliverables. So those are some of our magic moments, or I forget the term that you used.
Magnificent. They're magnificent.
Magnificent moments. Sometimes they feel magical.
Well, I would say some of what you did is magical. Like, imagine being able to pull 4 new landlords out of thin air after you thought you knew everybody.
Right.
That's magical. Where'd they come from? Probably been there the whole time. We just needed to go knock on some doors, make some phone calls, send some emails, be persistent in the space, I think is important. And the other thing that I really love that you've been doing is you don't just say, oh, well, we're a small town, there's nothing we can do. What you and the team in Stratford has done is said, we need to explore everything that is possible, as opposed to just saying, well, we don't have it. And you built a great infrastructure. So amazing. Thanks, Grant. All right. Question number 2. To heck with the magnificent moments. We're done those. They were fun. Here's my next question. I'd love some thoughts on this, and you can put your hand up if you want to answer. The whole movement towards doing coordinated access has been a movement that has helped decrease competition and improve cooperation in a number of different communities. Organizations looking at ways to work better with each other, and government looking for different ways of working effective with the nonprofit sector to try to help every single individual, couple, and family achieve a housing solution based upon his, her, or their needs. I brought it up a little bit when I was joking around with the Durham folks, but I want to bring it up as a broader question. If we're going to be in the space of landlord recruitment, and you have multiple housing locators in a community, some communities, every different agency has a different housing locator, sometimes they're community-wide. How do we get to a place where we're entering into cooperation rather than competition with each other in forging good landlord relationships and in ensuring people who are experiencing homelessness have access to the best possible unit for them, not just the only unit a particular housing locator could find. Sherwin, you're up.
The way we sort of do it here, when we spoke to the agencies, a lot of people were either they had someone in-house that would try to find units, or most of the agencies were just sort of doing it off the side of their desk. It was no one's specific job to do those. As we've sort of got the Home Connect program up and running, what we've found is that it's more of what we're finding is a lack of support in more cases than not is what's causing things to break down. So one of our requirements for our program is that, a tenant is working with a community agency that's able to provide, supports if they're needed. So, if anything comes up, there's an agency that's able to work with the tenant and sort those issues out. So what we've done I don't know the funding side of things, so I don't know exactly where the money came from, but we put out some calls to the different agencies to help fund, some extra support staff. So, as these programs develop and, start to, get up and running and work more efficiently, there may be a way for, multiple people at different agencies to collaborate together on, sort of the same database. Or maybe some agencies, maybe smaller agencies, might move away from having someone dedicated to that, and that role could be filled, in a support type role instead of housing locator if someone else is already doing the locating. So I think there's ways to work together, and our coordinated access program we sort of had to put on pause when the pandemic started, and that's all getting ready to go again now. So. In a month or so, we're ready to hitch our Home Connect wagon to the coordinated access horse, I guess. So what we're hoping to do, because right now people can come through Home Connect just with through one of the agencies. It's not necessarily part of the coordinated access piece. So what we're looking at doing now is when we see those referrals come through and the person doesn't have support, to have that go through the coordinated access piece so that we can line up support for them so that they can still participate in, the Home Connect program and the benefits that come with that. So I think there's several different ways that, we can work together on this. I know it's an issue because when I first went around and the last question on my survey to agencies was, would you be willing to share the list of landlords that you work with now? And most of them were eager up until that question and then sort of, so I know that is an issue that's probably faced in every community, but I think, as the programs develop and, people start working together more, to house people through these kinds of programs, I think we'll see, more collaboration come about just because it's easier. We've had some of the agencies, sort of refer landlords that they were working with in the past to us because of the Landlord Protection Fund and those kinds of things that they can't offer on their own. So, I mean, there's benefits to sort of everyone when we can all work together.
Benefits to everyone when we can all work together. Together, everyone achieves more. Team. Listen, I think what you're describing is commonplace in a lot of places, which is to say, when you first start down the road, there's a bit of a, and I'm going to use my words, not yours, but there's a bit of a, but those are my landlords. There's been a bit of a, but I cultivated those relationships. But they've historically worked with my clients. So one, they're owning people, they're owning landlords, and they're owning the process.
Let's see, I think though, when you look at that, when I went out and spoke to the landlords though, about, their experiences, working with community agencies in the past, not a lot of them have had good experiences. When things go wrong, there's only a certain amount that, that agency is able to do. So, there's a bit of a balance there. And I think the way that I put it a couple of years ago is that it seemed like in some cases, agencies were acting like, if they burned the bridge to one landlord, that just affected them. But what we've actually seen is that it's sort of the other way around. A lot of landlords don't know the difference between all of the different community agencies and what they do. So when that bridge is burned, it makes it harder for, any community agency to work with that landlord. I've had some landlords, even when, we've given them our sales pitch and all of the extra benefits that come along with it, they're done. They've had too many bad experiences. That's it. It's over. So, we need to be careful of that too. When an agency burns that bridge with the landlord, that affects everyone else in the community. And eventually, if there's no bridges left, you're going to run into trouble. So we've got to figure out a way to keep all of these things working together.
Hallelujah. Anybody else got thoughts on cooperation over competition? Fantastic. We might as well move into my next one, which is going to come down to another thing that we've heard frequently for those of you who are participating in the Built for Zero movement, that failing forward is really important. And the importance of failing forward is that we've demonstrated that we've tried, we've learned, and we have the opportunity to move forward again with that knowledge of having not succeeded to increase the likelihood of success moving forward. And I also personally have always taken failing forward as in, I don't know if I'm going to succeed if I don't try, so I better try, and better that I try and fail than not try at all. That's just, personal approach. But when it comes to landlords, one of the things that you will frequently hear in this sort of work are things like, well, that particular person, couple, or family is not a good fit for that landlord because it would be burning a bridge, because they're too high needs, because that's not the clientele they've used before. You'll hear other examples of failing forward that essentially says, well, you know what? We don't know what's going to work. We should just have everybody support them and let it work out in the wash. There's other people where it's like you look at the results of their housing locator, and it is essentially the same application process as if any of us walked up to the landlord and asked. In other words, where's the value add? So we seem to be failing at getting quicker access to units. And so my question for coast to coast to coast is, do any of you have examples of failing forward where you've actually improved your engagement with landlords because you screwed up in the process?
I can speak to that. I'm from Alberta, and I'm from a small community. We have, just like you said, Iain, where we're in a Housing First program, and we're trying to match our participants with the proper landlord. Our success rate has been like 90% as far as them sustaining their housing. And so it's quite important. It's a little difficult to say, but it's just the reality of it. You have some people who, some landlords that put less maintenance and care into their properties, and you have other properties that are well kept, and where there are very high risk participants, we try and match with the proper landlord. And it's been very successful thus far over the year. Reduces our evictions, reduces damages, and increases landlord engagement with our participants. So yeah, it's worked quite well.
That's great. Any others feeling forward? Sharon, you're up again.
I've got a quick one. We, in an effort to try to, get people housed as quickly as possible, at the beginning when we launched the program, we had a few people that moved in with the landlord, and we didn't get a chance to do that inspection and make sure, that they were connected to an agency or anything. And those tenancies did not go well. Basically, the property manager of the company said, we need to have a meeting. So, we got called to the office. We sorted out the issues in that meeting, the immediate issues. And as a result of that, we proposed that we meet on a monthly basis because of the number of clients that landlord houses for us. So every month we meet with them. Sometimes, there's no significant issue. Sometimes there's arrears of, it could be $50. But if you catch that early, you can figure out what's going on, maybe, take care of that. So we found that, since we started those monthly meetings with that landlord, which is something that we're going to do with any landlord that, has a significant number of units with us, we've been able to sort of, build that relationship to the point where, recently we did have some significant issues, go on in that building. And the landlord was willing to work with us and sort of, address those and make sure that that person was able to, stay housed. So I think, by, working to become closer with the landlord, you're increasing the chances that when issues arise, and they're going to come up, problems are going to come up. We all know that. They're a lot more likely to, work with you on that if you've been working with them prior to that, and it's not the first time that they've seen you in 6 months because all of a sudden there's a problem. So I think, by having those handful or those 2 or 3 tendencies at the beginning sort of crash and burn, and, have that meeting and sort of discuss, how we're going to sort of keep track of this on an ongoing basis, I think it made the relationship a lot stronger. It kind of feels like, we all work for the same place sometimes when we're in those meetings. So I think sometimes when you learn from your mistakes, and the landlord sees that you're more than just to talk, you're willing to walk the walk at the same time, it makes things a lot better. It's probably one of our best landlords that we have.
Come on. Out of the ashes?
Yep.
All right. I only probably have time for a couple more themes, maybe 3, but we'll see. I want to get one discussion going in the chat function. And the chat function question is going to be this. What's your best advice for someone starting out in this position? So use that chat function, just fill it up with your best advice for someone just starting into this position. Let's lift up some of the people that are just getting their feet wet in this space and let them know that there's lots of you who have expertise and experience that you're happy to share your best advice. Our next conversation question that I want to hear some ideas on is another piece relative to maintaining landlord relationships that it comes up in some communities, which is who does the landlord liaise with after the person has achieved, or the couple or the family has achieved housing? Should it be the role of the landlord specialist or landlord recruiter or housing specialist, whatever you call that job description in your community? Should it be their role because they're the one who had the entry point into the unit? Should it be the support worker or the agency that the individual was connected to in the coordinated access process? Or should it be that it's neither, that it's a third party that then becomes introduced to do mediation and mitigation of potential evictions? So in your experiences in this role throughout the country, who after housing? And if you can multitask, keeping it going in the chat function, what's your best advice for those starting out? We're going to do 2 conversations at once. It's going to be amazing.
Iain?
Yes.
Sorry, but it's end of day here in Moncton, so I'm super slow. Can you repeat the second question? I was still focusing on my answer for the first one when you were talking about that. Sorry.
Well, this is what happens when we start multitasking. So the question for the chat function was, what's your best advice for those starting out in this position? The live question for discussion was, after that individual couple or family gets into housing, who is responsible to the landlord? Is it the person that housed them, the person or agency that's supporting them or supposed to be supporting them? Is it a third agency that enters in the mix? How do you deal with that part of the relationship in your community? Because that can be so critical to maintaining good relationships with landlords.
Are we starting the chat discussion now?
Well, the chat discussion is already happening.
Oh, I'm sorry, the live discussion.
The live discussion, we are definitely starting now. Okay. And we're loving it. It's great.
It's a tricky one because again, here in Moncton, we're still just really trying to get better at our landlord engagement. So we're still in our learning stages. We don't have as much to offer in terms of experience or advice. But what I'm seeing is we have our support agency, like the agency who's supporting our clients are usually the ones who know things first. So it's great when landlords can connect with them. to, you know, inform them of issues, or for them to we encourage them to reach out to the landlords on a regular basis, not wait for the landlord to reach out to them, because we know by the time the landlord's reaching out to them, it's usually to tell them there's an eviction happening. So we kind of just started a best practice here in Moncton, whereby the support agency reaches out to the landlord just to introduce themselves, to let them know of their role, and then they check in a couple of times the first month, to just like at the first month of move-in, just to kind of check in and build that rapport, and kind of, it's case by case if it needs to be a lot of contact, or if it can be just, you know, an occasional check-in. The downside I'm seeing to that is that it's a dual role, because they also have the client, you know, telling their side of the story, or there's a trust issue that happens there. So when we can right now here in Moncton, because we don't really have a person designated for landlord engagement, what we try to do is so if we have a program and that has housing case managers that are going into the unit supporting the client, we kind of have them as the client contact, and the manager of the program do the landlord pieces. So kind of like almost like, for lack of a better example, like a mom and dad kind of scenario. That's what we're doing so far. It's pretty okay. I'm sure there's room for improvement, but as I say, we're kind of at the grassroots of our housing landlord engagement pieces.
Yep.
For us, it can come both ways. I think most of the time, it's usually the agency that's working with the client that would hear complaints first. Most of the agencies we work with are pretty good at just, you know, passing that information along to us, even if it's just as a heads up. We do sort of get involved if there are issues that sort of need sorting out, you know, mediation, I guess. And what we found was that sometimes those situations would get tricky. The support agency is obviously going to support the client. That's, you know, that's what they do. So, you know, within our, you know, organization, you know, I was a landlord engagement lead. But at the same time, you know, there's situations where, you know, it's not landlord, it's not tenant, it's somewhere in the middle. And, you know, you're trying to, I guess, kind of play both sides of the fence at the same time. You're trying to work with the landlord and support them. And you're also trying to, you know, ensure that, you know, the tenant has a place to live and that they're supported and treated properly and all that stuff. So what we found was that we hired a second person to do a tenant, like, so I'm landlord engagement lead and their tenancy support lead. So whenever there's an issue, you know, where the two sides don't really see eye to eye, we have someone on sort of each side of that within our organization sort of advocate for, you know, the respective parties, I guess. So that way, you know, you don't have a landlord person trying to provide support to the, you know, to the tenant and all, and, you know, it getting back and forth, because then, you know, the landlord would come back and say, well, you know, you told the agency such a thing. And it's like, well, that's what the law says, but I'm not saying, right? So you get yourself in those weird situations. So by sort of splitting that down the middle, it's made it so much easier. And it's also allowed me to deal less with the complaints that come up from a tenancy and work more on the landlord engagement and that relationship piece. So, you know, even when we have landlords that are, and in his words, I'm pissed off, you know, it's not at me as the landlord engagement lead, because I'm there to support him. So it kind of helps you get through some of the rough waters when you're sort of disconnected a little bit from the tenant side of things to be able to maintain that relationship with the landlord.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And the chat is going well. There's some really good advice showing up for people who are relatively new to their roles. And I want to say thank you to everybody who's participating in that. I have time just for one more. And it's related to responsiveness, which is kind of a follow-up on the last one. If a landlord has an issue, in your community, have you developed standards of what the response looks like and how much time it takes before you respond to the landlord? And if you don't have standards, do you have like a gut feeling of what seems adequate? And I bring that up because some communities in going down this road historically have been, I'm available Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Other places say, I'm available Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Here's an after hours number, which is usually a 24/7 operation in the community. Not a lot of utility necessarily in delivering those phone numbers. Like if it's a tenancy issue at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're not going to send out like a batch of social workers and superhero capes to show up and fix the scene. It can probably wait a few more hours. But in terms of responsiveness, it's one of the things that landlords look for. They want to know that somebody will follow up or follow through. What is a reasonable amount of time before you respond?
And here in Moncton, we don't have a specific standard, for example, but we did create a document, and it's like a best practices document. And it's quite neat because we kind of broke it in two parts, and one part is just some bullets on what the agency, whomever is going to be the landlord, contact, what their responsibilities are to the landlord. And then we have a second part where what the tenant's responsibilities are. And we get them to kind of read it all over and initial each line, both the agency and the tenant, so all expectations are transparent. And it's transparent from the beginning that this is a team effort and there are expectations on both sides, and that we're all going to be communicating together for the best interest of maintaining your housing. So we just created that document as kind of I think we labeled it like a best practices, and we've asked coordinated access to implement it as a mandatory document when offering housing to a BNL client in a private landlord setting.
Okay.
It's new, so I don't know how well it's working yet, but it really writes down, how often a landlord should be contacted and by who and what and like just kind of really some specific points to just keep everybody kind of on par. And it's a document you can reflect back on if the tenancy is not succeeding, you can reflect back and say, well, did we do these pieces? And if so, and still isn't working, maybe we need to reevaluate our pieces. So it's just right now it's at the birth stage, but I think it's going to be a helpful document for us to really set some standards. Maybe that's the next step, is actually turning it into some actual standards.
You've definitely heard the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 complaint here. When I asked, for more detail from landlords about that, it's not necessarily that they want somebody that's able to come out, 24/7. Their main concern seems to be that they don't really know who to call, or if they should call anybody, or, when something comes up in the middle of the night, do I call the mental health crisis line? Do I call 911? Do I leave it alone? So we just sent them off. We didn't get them back yet, but sort of like a fridge magnet that says, if this is the problem, call here. If it's an emergency, call 911. If it's a mental health thing, call this, and sort of they can go through that list. The big thing that we've noticed with those sort of after hours issues that come up is they're a lot of times they're mental health or addictions or substance use problems and those kinds of things. And landlords have said to us, I'm not a counselor, or I'm not a whatever. I don't know how to deal with these issues when they come up. So we had some money, we have some money in our budget for training and stuff. And with the pandemic and not being able to get together and those kinds of things, it hasn't really been used. So we just started talking the past couple of weeks about offering mental health first aid training to the landlords that we work with and covering the cost of that. So, if the concern is that you don't know what to do if a problem comes up, that's not because you work with our program. That's, that happens. That's part of being a landlord. So, having landlords, equipped to deal with those situations in the community in general is probably a benefit to everyone. So, benefits us and the clients that we work with. It sort of benefits the community as a whole. So we're hoping that, we can take some of that anxiety off of landlords when those kinds of situations come up by giving them some of the skills to be able to identify and sort of address those situations without being, scared or worried or calling 911, which sometimes is worse. They'll know what to do.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who participated today in the chat, in the conversation, in the engagement on the topic. Thanks to the Canadian Alliance and the Built for Zero team specifically for pulling together this community of practice call. Thanks for inviting me to facilitate. You all are doing incredible jobs. There's nowhere across the country that I'm aware of where you would say, we have more than enough affordable and supportive housing, and yet we are continuing to try to end homelessness. You are absolutely critical to the work that is necessary to build that bridge. On behalf of the people you serve, thank you. Marie, back over to you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Iain. And I agree, like what an amazing chat and conversation. I think people are getting lots of great ideas there. I am just going to share the screen back briefly again. That great conversation. Thanks, Iain, for being here to facilitate it. This is Iain's contact information. So again, this slide deck will go out as a PDF. We'll also have the recording, but I am just going to launch a very quick poll here just to get your feedback on the webinar today. There it is. So you should see that come up. There's 3 quick questions for you just to answer before you head off for the day. And I have to say, I was excited. Someone was like, so good to be doing this on a Friday. I'm like, I think it's only Thursday. So just to
Yeah, I can confirm it's only Thursday.
In case anyone thought they were heading into the weekend.
There goes my plan for tomorrow, Marie.
Exactly. Oh, that'd be so great. Yeah, I feel like this is a great conversation. I feel like we should maybe do this again in a number of months and maybe have folks back and see how things are going. So before the end of the year, perhaps we'll hold another one of these community practice calls for this very, as Iain was highlighting, like super important roles in our system, and more people are getting them, and so many great ideas today.
I've got to head out. All the best, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
That's it for us too. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
Happy almost Friday.